what I want to do is quickly review from last time because it's been a while, and I apologize for that too. I was on bed rest for much of my pregnancy. When I came to teach the class, they modified my bed rest, and then shortly after the last class, they put me back on strict bed rest until I had the baby. So, again, thank you for your patience there as well. I'm wondering if anybody had any questions percolate up since the last class, or anything that I can address right now. Otherwise, I'm just going to jump into the review that I think is important. Okay.
I think the amazing part to me that was beneficial was your diagram of the brain. Good. And where if something has happened and now you really click into when you hear about somebody with dementia, the first thing I think is I'm wondering where it affected what part of the brain. To know if that could have helped me work with them.
That's exactly why we give you that diagram, so that you can see those symptoms in the context of the degeneration, right? Remember, in Latin, dementia is the breakdown of the brain. So if you can visualize behavior in the context of the diagnosis, right, which causes the brain breakdown, right, different diagnoses, but all lead to dementia. We remember that, right? Dementia is not a diagnosis. Dementia is a cluster of symptoms, right? And there are many different ways to arrive at that cluster of symptoms. So we talked about the main diagnoses, which, you know, for our purposes aren't so important, except for if you get told you're going to have somebody with Lewy body dementia, then it would be helpful to know that they might be having intense visual hallucinations. Might be helpful to know they might have some motor disturbances, and that these are normal for that diagnosis, right? If you're told you have somebody with frontotemporal lobe dementia, you might expect some issues with speech. You might expect some wacky behavior because those frontal lobes deal with inhibition, judgment, impulse control, those sorts of things.
I think, look, for us,
so I think it's important to know
it's good enough.
the different nuances. We're not going to be diagnosing. We're not going to be referring to physicians. We're not going to be doing that kind of stuff in our capacity, but we want the information. And so I'm glad that the lobes of the brain helped. And, you know, even though it says lobes of the brain affected by Alzheimer's disease, remember Alzheimer's disease is global deterioration, the whole brain's affected. So it's still helpful to look at that, even if you've got somebody who doesn't have Alzheimer's but has a different kind of dementia. So thank you for that feedback. That was what I was intending it to provide, and it sounds like it did for you. Anyone else?
I just wanted to say I read another book that was really good, and it was called Remembering the Music But Forgetting the Words.
I haven't heard that title, so I'll look for that one. Thank you. So what I want to do, we went through pretty in-depth last time tips and principles for communicating and managing confusion with folks who have dementia, and a little bit around behavior management, because so much of the behavior management has to do with being able to connect. So the communication is a huge piece of it. What I want to do is to show some video clips that provide, you know, I gave some anecdotal examples, but these provide some more visual examples of what that looks like. You know, anybody can say distract or redirect. We hear that all the time, but what does that look like? So the first clip I'm going to show, and it looks like this
is the first one you might show. Hold it.
Okay.
Because I had a problem.
Okay.
I promised you a better TV set last time.
That's okay.
Yesterday I remembered. So
there
are two TV sets in a small rupture.
Okay.
Getting them down. And
that's watching TV but not remembering what.
So I got my TV set from home. Where do you want to put in?
I've got a DVD.
We got the DVD?
Yeah. Some of these we have DVDs for, and some we have VHS for, because they don't make them anymore, so we couldn't update.
You know, my daughter was here. She's 13. She could fix that in a minute.
Yeah. My 5-year-old could do better than me. He's showing me how to do my iPhone. It's humbling.
Embarrassing.
It's humbling.
Now, play.
Yeah, that's play here too.
I got my button here.
Yay, so I
Good
just
job,
need to spin. I
Doc.
just need to skip it forward. Thank you. Looks like, I think maybe the issue was probably the,
No, it was the TV set.
Look
it
at
wasn't the
buttons on that.
VHS, because
No,
our
no.
videos were.
No. It was the set.
Okay, I want to get to a specific person that they interview. So this is, these are real folks with dementia and clinicians here. Now this talks about stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, blah, blah, blah. We don't talk about dementia in those linear stages anymore. We talk about dementia in terms of early, middle, and late stages, and mild, moderate, and severe impairment. Because the stages really aren't that linear. People go all over the place.
Do you want to sit there?
Right. These are so much easier to queue up, I'm telling you. With the, these are so much easier than the VHS. There you can just skip. So this is an interview with a person who's moderately confused. Turn the volume on.
What she needs. So you need to try to figure that out.
Alice is also at stage 5,
So just
but
moderate.
further along in the dementing illness process.
I have a twin sister. You do? What's your twin sister's name?
Esther.
Esther. She's a little bit smaller than you. She's a good age.
Where is she? I haven't seen her for quite a while.
Well, you know I haven't seen her this morning either.
But she is around.
Yeah, you know how she is. She comes and goes.
Well, I don't know because I haven't been seeing her. I've been away from her.
Yeah. Well, now that you're back, she'll stop by.
Where is she? It wouldn't be you.
She always does.
Come on now. I was born there a few years ago.
Where were you born?
Ladysmith,
Ladysmith.
Wisconsin.
Oh, I'm from Wisconsin also.
Where are you?
Mm-hmm. A little north of Ladysmith.
Oh,
Between Ladysmith and here.
oh, oh, sure. Yeah, my name was. I can't think. But my husband was pretty well known around. My husband was my dad, but I was just a little.
Now, did you live in Ladysmith a lot of your life?
Most of, well, no, until I was growing up, and then we came up to the Louvre.
I see.
Yeah,
So your growing up years, you were in Ladysmith.
yeah.
And what did you and your twin sister do?
We didn't do anything. We were too small.
I bet you went to school.
Oh yeah, for 2 years. Esther and Alice.
Esther and Alice, both twins.
Yeah,
And you're Alice.
yeah.
Did you ever go, I don't know, in the winter, did you go sliding?
Oh sure.
Play in the snow? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh sure.
And did you ever go to any dances when you were getting a little older?
Yes. Yeah. We tried at least.
You tried? Mm-hmm. Did some boys ask you to dance?
Oh,
I bet.
of course.
Of course. You still do.
Alice's stages seem to vary with the minute. It appears sometimes she understands a little bit more than other times. Her moods can switch very quickly from minute to minute. Sometimes she's definitely more alert than other times and appears to understand more what you're saying. Alice's repetitive themes normally include her twin sister, who's been gone for about 70 years. It also includes her husband, who's been gone for years, and her other brothers and sisters.
She didn't try to correct her.
Right. So you're one step ahead of me. What techniques did you see them using?
Physical contact and lots of laughing and joking and
And agreeing with what she's saying. Yeah.
Asking questions.
About the past, not the current.
Right. Remember that one. Don't ask questions that rely on short-term memory. Nobody said what was for lunch today, Alice. Right? Nobody said, do you remember when your daughter came to visit yesterday, Alice? Right? All these questions were long term. So they set her up to feel more comfortable answering and more likely to be accurate. A lot of people watch these clips and say, oh, she's not that confused though. Right? Because she's able to answer all those questions. And I say, well, they're setting her up to be more likely to access those memories. Remember, we say first in, last out with the brain. The first memories put in are the last to come out because those memories have already been stored. That broken hippocampus isn't storing new short-term memories into long-term memories. Do you remember we talked about that last time? The hippocampus in the brain is that relay center. It's like the save button on your computer. So that's why people can tell you who their first grade teacher was, but they can't tell you what they had for breakfast this morning. Right. And that throws lots of family members for a loop. We talked about that, right? I think she's just doing this to get my goat. Because how come she can tell that story with complete accuracy, but then she lies and says she didn't go to the doctor yesterday? She's just lying to me. It feels like that sometimes to people. So you'll have sensitivity with family members. You know, if they're saying, oh, she's just driving me crazy, she's just lying about everything, right? You'll have a little bit of sensitivity and understand why it might feel like that to family members, rather than thinking, gosh, that daughter's such a D word, right? That daughter really is grappling with how difficult it is to have mom remember some things and not other things, or confabulate and mix those things up. What other techniques did we see? And if it's helpful, pull out the form from last time that has the tips and techniques that we talked about. What else did you see?
They addressed her by name.
They addressed her by name.
They joined her in her reality.
They joined in her reality, absolutely. So one time when I was new at this, I was talking to somebody who was telling me this wonderful, lovely story about his life. And I turned to his wife and said, it sounds like today's a really good day. Wow, he's not so far along, huh? He's doing really well. And she said, yeah, except for not one word he told you was accurate. So he could sound lucid, but not really be lucid. Does that make sense? So I had a family, I was teaching a class at Kaiser last month, and I had a family telling me they were really concerned about their mother who had recently been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. She's a younger woman. And they said, you know, we're really concerned because she's telling everyone she's not taking her medicine, and, you know, she wants to drink wine. She's always had wine, but she's not taking her medicine, and we don't know what to do because she's just in such denial about her diagnosis. She's telling everyone she doesn't have Alzheimer's and she's not taking that medicine, and we don't know what to do. And I said, oh, those were the daughters, and the husband was there too. The father was, the daughter's father, the wife's husband, obviously. He was there too, and he said, well, she is taking her medicine. You know, I'm looking, and they're, you know, I'm there, I'm looking, and they're gone. I set them out, and she takes them. Well, she's saying she's not taking them. And I said, well, what makes you think she's not taking them? Because I'm hearing two different things. And the daughter said, well, I talked to her caregiver, and her caregiver said she called in and said, you know, have you taken your morning medicine? And she said, well, I don't take that medicine. I don't have Alzheimer's. So they were interpreting that statement as denial and resistance, when in reality, mom isn't aware she has Alzheimer's because she forgot. And mom isn't aware she's taking medication because she forgot, which is consistent with the diagnosis.
Is there anything wrong with her denying it even though she remembers?
Not
Not
in my opinion. It's painful for the family.
All right. Is it all right to go along with his story that he was a famous aviator or he climbed the mountain? Ask him about what's wrong with the fantasies.
There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's what we're suggesting we do. But what I'm saying for all of you who are going to be going to people's houses where there's a family dynamic,
so
you may want to be prepared for family. Not every family will have that kind of ability yet.
So working the family is harder to work with than the person with Alzheimer's, right?
The person with Alzheimer's is always in the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
their experience is their reality. So if we can join in their reality, then we are their ally, and we can kind of get in, and they're the leader. If we know how to follow in dancing, right? It's the same kind of concept.
Okay.
It's a dance, and they get to be the leader.
Okay, thanks.
They get to be, or else we'll be tripping over each other's feet. The family has more of an emotional, historical tie and a desire for their loved one not to have this illness. When I told those daughters, it sounds like your mom really is taking her medication, but she can't remember she took it, that was not a relief for them. They started crying. So even though their complaint was, mom's in denial and she's resisting her medication and it's driving us crazy because we feel like we are obligated to make her take this medication because it's the only darn thing we can do. And she won't take it. We feel like we're not doing our job because we can't force mom to take the medicine.
Aren't they a bit afraid
She said there's a button.
They are.
of the
So
Alzheimer's being waiting for them?
I don't know. I think we didn't get into that, but I would guess. So when I said to them, it sounds like she is taking her medicine, but she just forgot. Even though their request was, how do we get her to take her medicine? It was still sad for them. Because the reason she needs the darn medicine is because she has this disease. So it's a story about grief and loss, this whole family caregiving journey, the whole thing.
It seems expectations are off. The family members are in expectations of what they see as normal, and the patient, the Alzheimer's patient, is in their own domain or world, and that the family, as the adjustment that the family needs, I believe, or any family, needs to be expectations, lower or higher, but just go with it and not try to fight it, and try to not appease the patient, but just comfort, and rather than be negative and be upset because they're not doing what they think they want to do, try to understand where the patient's at.
Yes, indeed. Easier said than done.
I've done it, but I'm just saying.
When it's not our family member, piece of cake. When it's our family member, absolutely difficult. So the goal is absolutely to get to that place. And when I'm working clinically with a family member, that is absolutely my goal. But I have to be sensitive to the fact that it requires a huge amount of effort and grief to get them there.
I'd like to say I worked with a patient for 8 years and gave him his final doses of morphine, and I was not a family member, but it's not a piece of cake.
Right, but comparatively speaking, it is. Yeah, it's not. Nothing. None of this is a piece of cake, but comparatively speaking, it's a piece of cake compared to whether or not it was. Does that make sense? I'm not meaning to be disrespectful.
No, you're right. You're right. I was emotionally distraught. All I can tell you, and piece of cake was not in the vocabulary.
Right. So I apologize if that sounded flippant. I was making a
general comment,
comparative statement compared to families who might be having a difficult time. You might walk into a family household who's having an easier time with this than you, and then you might think, boy, they don't care. But it might be they've done this before. Might be they already took a class. Might be they've been doing this for the last 20 years and they've already gone through the stuff you're just now encountering. So family dynamics are going to be different no matter what household you walk into. I'm just putting, I'm just throwing stuff out there that I see come up pretty typically, common themes. Be prepared for this. Doesn't mean it's always going to happen, but the things you need to be prepared for are the complications. I don't need to teach a class on going to a house that's lovely and easy and everything's working out perfectly, because you can do that. I need to teach a class on what to do when people are struggling, right? What other tips and techniques did you see them putting into practice? Yes.
I think I noticed that nobody corrected her.
Yes.
Very
yes.
good.
So So that brings up whether or not she actually went sledding, whether or not she was really born in Ladysmith, is irrelevant. Because if our goal is to connect, remember that's I think it's principle number 4, communicate, connect regardless of the content. If that's our goal, we don't really care whether or not she's accurate. We care whether or not we can establish rapport with her enough to have her feel safe to connect with us.
Right, absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, she used her name.
So, absolutely, we're not going to be correcting, and that might be family members might jump in and correct, and we might see them as annoying and nitpicky, and why don't they just leave her the heck alone, because why does it matter? But the truth is they might have an emotional desire for mom to remember those important things. I want you to remember your mom. I want you to remember that this is what happened. I want you to remember that I love you and I'm your nice daughter. And so I think the best thing you guys can do in your capacity is just to model. We're not going to be giving advice to the family. They're not in a position to hear it from us right now. But just model and let them see how when you go along with it. And you might wink at the daughter so they know, I don't believe you actually stole her wallet. Right? You might do a little wink to just send the message, I get it, but we're not going to have this conversation in front of your loved one because it will do no good. Right? What else did we see?
My daughter told me about her driving 100 miles an hour on a trip that we were on. She knew all the details of it. My daughter doesn't remotely have Alzheimer's. My daughter is, working at PhD level and that sort of thing. Okay. Described it perfectly. I said, hon, that's wonderful. Do you want me to get out the pictures and show you how old you were? And she said, how old was I? And I said, you were 9 when I went on that trip. I was the one that drove the 100 miles an hour and got in the problem. And she can remember every detail of it. It doesn't mean that you have Alzheimer's just because you change. I like the thing, don't ruin a good story with facts.
There you go.
Very
I
good.
think that's a good thing to remember.
Very good.
Again, and our experiences and our memories and our narrative, in my language, I would call that narrative therapy, right? Our narrative creates our reality, right? And we all come at the world from a different perspective. We're all going to leave this class taking away much of the same experience, but every one of us subtly different. Depending on what side of the room you're sitting in, depending on how much sleep you got last night, depending on how much coffee you drank, depending on whether or not you think I'm brilliant or completely annoying. I mean, really, we're all going to have a subtly different experience, and that will create our reality. So again, if our goal is connection, we're not going to pay attention to content.
Right. Acceptance.
I'd like to add that there is non-alcoholic wine and beer that's not going to mess up their medications too. Looks same bottle, only
I did that for years and tried to transport alcohol to non-alcoholic, so on a transition, so he wouldn't get too freaked out about that. And it's expensive, but it worked.
And again, we have to massage that concept with family members. A lot of times they'll say, oh, he would know. And I always say, yep, he might know. And then you can use these skills and say, gosh, they must have given us an off bottle. Next time I go to the store, I'm going to exchange this. I'm going to let them know, save that bottle and I'll bring it back to Safeway.
You drink that one and we'll go get another.
And you can say that every time.
Yeah.
Another one? Gosh, we're going to have to try a different brand. But the truth is, every time we have to make a change in how we approach something with our loved ones, it brings up grief. Change is necessary because of the loss of ability to do it the other way. So everything we suggest is pretty simple. But simple doesn't mean not difficult. Simple means not complicated, right? It's difficult emotionally to do, even though it's not a complicated solution. Does that make sense? What else did we see? You had your hand up.
Reassurance. I don't know if anybody said that or not, but I thought they were reassuring when they said that her sister, well, she'll be coming today now that she knows you're back.
Yeah, they reassured and they joined in her reality. And that happened at the get-go, right? And Alice's themes, they say at the end, typically are around her sister who's been gone for 70 years. We're talking long-term memory. She must have died when they were kids. So that's reassurance, absolutely. And it's also allowing themselves to join in her reality, giving themselves permission to alter the truth. Remember we talked about that? Not altering the truth for the sake of being...
She signed it, I think.
Being maliciously untruthful or selfishly sneaky, right? But altering the truth by following their lead and creating a sense of safety. We're going to talk more about that when we talk about managing difficult behaviors. So absolutely, we want to be reassuring, and one of the ways to do that is to join in their reality rather than using logic and reasoning. If they could use logic and reasoning reliably, they wouldn't need us, right? By definition, dementia is impaired intellectual capacity, lack of ability to use logic and reasoning, and memory impairment.
I think that's one of the hardest
That word,
things.
altering reality, altering, what was that word you said, altering?
Giving yourself permission to
Alter the truth.
Altering, yes. And it's on, you were here last time, that's on one of the tips from the tip sheet that you have. So you can write it down if it helps you remember, because that's how I learned.
Didn't know that term, and I love that term. It really makes me feel better about it.
Good. Yeah, and it's about joining in their reality. It's not about making up crazy stories to make fun of someone, or it's not about lying for the sake of lying. It's recognizing that their truth is their truth, their experience is their truth, and their perspective and perception is different because their brain is interpreting differently. So you will never convince them that their reality isn't their reality, as you won't ever convince me that my reality isn't my reality, right? So I'm glad you brought that up, because much of what we're talking about today actually is true for folks without dementia too. It's just good, respectful communication. It's just paying attention.
Right.
When a person has dementia and we want to connect, we must pay more attention. We have to look at body language. We have to think about emotions behind the words. But the truth is, when my husband and I are arguing and I lash out and say something, there's a meaning behind those words, right? I might mean, you hurt my feelings when you said that. And I might say, you're such a jerk. All right? So if he pays attention to the words rather than the emotions behind it, we're miscommunicating. So somebody could tell him that when I'm being particularly crabby, it really just means my feelings are hurt, right? And my job is to, since I don't have dementia, try to be more honest about my feelings so he doesn't have to be such a detective. But the truth is, that's how we communicate anyway. Just paying attention to content and words and logic keeps everything at the surface, and that's very convenient for us. We can just float through the day, things are fast, hey, how you doing? Fine, good, I'm glad you said fine because I don't have to stop, right? But the truth is, if we are really going to connect with anybody, we have to try to see the world through their eyes. Their experience is their reality. And that's true for a person with dementia. It's true for a person without dementia. However, with dementia, we can't rely on the surfacey stuff. We can rely on surfacey stuff with people who don't have dementia. We might not have a deep connection, but if we're going to have any connection at all, we have to use those other resources like emotional meaning and the feeling behind the words. Remember, last time we talked about connect to the emotion, not the words. Reassure to the emotion, not the words. So if I say I have to go home, I have to go home, I have to go home, I might not say we're going home at 3 o'clock. That would be connecting to the words. Because that person might not necessarily be talking about an actual physical geographic location.
Right, right.
They might be saying, I don't feel at home. And it's not about this room. I don't feel at home in my own skin. Because home represents so many things. We listed those off last time, right? A place where I feel empowered, a place where I can let my guard down, a place where I belong, a place where people love me, a place where things are familiar and predictable. All of those things that make us feel safe and secure, home represents. And this disease has taken that from me.
How do you deal with a relative that tells the person whatever she happens to say?
Mm-hmm.
That, oh mother, that you have Alzheimer's and that isn't so.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's, and just totally, no. And always saying that you have a disease, and, you know.
I think the way we deal with that depends on our role. So if the family member was my client and my goal was to help that family member come to terms and cope differently, I might pursue helping them understand the disease a little bit more. I might pursue, validating how hard it is for them to see their mother getting all of these things wrong, validating what a loss it is for them that their mother who shared that experience, who shared that memory, no longer helps to hold that anymore, so they're the only person holding that. Does that make sense?
Yep.
When we have shared memories, we hold something together. And when the other person forgets, then who's there to validate my experience? Who's there to, there are some special, special moments that my husband and I have experienced together. Most recently, he's the only person who was there when my child was just born. If he forgot that experience, that would be heartbreaking for me. Because we hold that together. Yeah, so it's not just about me saying, okay, he's got Alzheimer's,